right, well, welcome to this series of videos that the Moot Court folks and I are putting together. The purpose of these videos is to give you a sense of what Moot Court is, what the Advanced Appellate Advocacy class is about, and also to give you some tips and information about upcoming lawyering skills oral arguments. I'm Professor Anderson. I'm the advisor of the Moot Court board here at the law school. I also teach the Advanced Appellate Advocacy class. And what I'm going to do is ask the rest of the folks who are in this meeting to also introduce themselves. So we'll switch first to our new Chief Justice.
Hi, as Professor Anderson said, my name is Logan Wallace, and I am the Chief Justice of the Moot Court Board. And this year I participated, or was supposed to participate, in the Federal Bar Association's Moot Court competition.
My name is Dylan Boyd. I'm a second-year student. I did the ABA competition in Philadelphia this year with Trent, who's my partner. Also here at the school, I'll be the editor-in-chief of the Law Journal next year, and I'm also a research assistant for Professor Lee.
Hi, my name is Tommy, and I'm a 3L here at the law school. I have competed 2 times at the UC Davis Asylum and Refugee Law competition in Sacramento, California, and this last fall I competed in the national competition in Milwaukee. And I am also on Journal, but I am just a note editor and just excited to graduate.
Yeah, and my name's Trent Wagner. I'm also a 2L. I'm the briefing justice for the Moot Court team, taking over from Tommy, who is currently the briefing justice, I guess, for this term. I am also a research assistant for Professor Anderson. And I also will be probably helping you a lot if you end up taking the AAA class with assignments that will be due for the National Health Law competition coming up in the fall.
Okay, great. Trent, I'm glad that you mentioned that you're taking over for Tommy, because I was waiting. Tommy, you forgot something.
I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's fine. Tommy was the briefing justice, and now Trent is the briefing justice. So we have actually 3 officers of our Moot Court board. We have the Chief Justice, which is the role that Logan is fulfilling this coming year. In another set of videos, you'll meet the current Chief Justice, whose name is Sarah McCluskey. And then we have an Associate Justice, and then we have a briefing justice. And the briefing justice is the one who works with helping you learn to do some things related to writing, as you might imagine, a brief. But we'll talk about some of those things as we go along. So I thought it would be a great way to handle this by breaking up these videos into making them little shorter pieces, and we'll sort of focus on some specific topics in each of them, rather than just giving you one long hour's worth of conversation here. And I thought a great way to sort of break the ice and kind of get the conversation going, especially because I know what's on the top of the minds of those folks who are taking lawyering skills right now, are those oral arguments that you're going to be doing here in the month of April. And so I thought an interesting question for these folks to share with you, given that they are people who have gone through the Advanced Appellate Advocacy class as well as lawyering skills, and they've also done or gotten ready for national competitions. Logan mentioned that his was canceled. Unfortunately, that's one of the side effects of this whole coronavirus situation, was that he didn't actually get to go, but he did prepare for it. And he's got we're going to be doing a competition, which we'll talk about later, that he's going to be doing here in April to sort of make up for it. But they've all been through that process. So I'd ask them to share with you an answer to this question, and we'll just, we'll let Logan start off with the answer to this question, which is, when you think back to when you were doing lawyering skills and you knew this oral argument was coming up, how did you feel about that? Were you kind of nervous about that, and how did you handle that?
I would say that, well, my parents say it best, that I've never lacked confidence in anything that I do, and this was one as well where I was fairly confident, but at the same time, it was such a different activity or interaction than anything else I'd done before, so I had no idea what to expect, and that's always scary going into something for the first time without really doing anything. I didn't do debate before. I didn't do anything like that. So I was a little bit nervous. But I think what you have to realize is that everyone else in your class is in the exact same position. They may have done debate before, they may have done some other things, but no one's done this. And this is an entirely different animal, and everyone's in the exact same boat. So really, there's nothing to be scared of.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to weigh in about that? About, so were you dreading doing the lawyering skills arguments, or did you sort of feel like you knew what was going to happen, and how did you feel about it after you finished with the argument?
Well, I was very fortunate because first year I had my roommate was actually in moot court. And so she was able to give me an idea of what was going to happen. And it can be terrifying getting up before a panel of judges, of your peers, of people you don't know. And I know I was personally thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to ask me all these hard questions and they're going to try and trip me up. But that's not true at all. You have to really go into it with the mindset of they're asking me questions because they want to know that I understand the problem. And if you can just think that when you're standing before the panel, then you'll be golden.
Yeah, it's going to be a little different, right? Because it's going to be on Zoom. So talking to a panel of people like on this, maybe that'll make it a little different. But Trent, you were going to say something?
Yeah, as far as my experience, I was really kind of dreading the whole thing. And after doing it, walking out of the room after our argument was over, I thought to myself, well, that wasn't bad at all. Even going through practice, I had a strange feeling about it. But after actually doing the round, and I think what happened was I came out of it knowing that I most likely know the problem 10 times better than the judges who are actually asking questions. And so if you just put the time in and you research, you're going to be fine, because all this stuff's going to be in your head. And all you have to do is just have a conversation with somebody about a subject that you've spent probably months talking about by the time you actually give the argument.
Right.
I was going to say, just to build on a couple of things that they said, like Logan's exactly right. Like everyone you're arguing with and against is in the same boat. I know, like I was terribly nervous. Like I actually went up against Logan in our first year oral arguments, and I was terribly intimidated. Logan's undergraduate major was like public speaking. I am not a fan of public speaking. It's one of the reasons why I did moot court, was to build my skills doing that. But then Trent's right too. The more comfortable you get with your argument, when you first stand at the podium, you're going to be nervous. Everyone's nervous. And honestly, I'd question you if you weren't nervous. But the more you stand up there for a while, and the more you realize how comfortable you are with your argument, the more that nervous energy kind of goes away, and the more you can control the discussion. And it's just having a conversation with people sitting across from you, really. So it gets better as you go on. So.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds like great advice, right? Just view it as a conversation and understand you know more than the judges do. Even if their questions seem like they are intimidating, it's generally because they're just trying to figure out what's going on. And then if you relax, it gets better as you go along. You just have to get through that first hurdle and get those first words out. So we encourage you to spend some time preparing and enjoy the experience. So we've mentioned a couple of times now the word moot court, and I think this would be a good point to explain what it is we're talking about, because we sort of one of those things, we all know what that means, but we don't want to assume that everybody else understands it too. So Trent, could you talk a little bit about what is moot court and why did you try out for it?
Sorry about that. Yeah, so moot court is a team at the law school similar to, or is an extracurricular organization kind of similar to Law Journal or Trial Team. But in moot court, what you're practicing is appellate advocacy. And that's something that is incredibly important when you talk about your ability to think on your feet in a courtroom. And one of the reasons that I decided to take AAA and then subsequently try out for moot court was because I wanted to, for one, build my writing skills, because moot court is very similar to how your oral arguments are going right now for lawyering skills, in that you spend a lot of time drafting a brief, and then you spend a lot of time practicing for that brief and then arguing it in front of a judge. And we go to competitions to argue these things. My competition with Dylan, for instance, was in Philadelphia. But getting back to the reason that I really joined was I didn't do the best in lawyering skills. I didn't fail. I was really in the middle of the pack in that class, and that was under what I normally would hold myself to that standard. And so I thought AAA was a good way to challenge myself to become a better writer. And it has the added benefit of if you get on moot court, continuing your writing, developing your writing skills, and getting to develop your oral advocacy skills. And you get to go to some pretty cool places if you actually get to go and don't get rained out by a virus.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add anything about that? About how would you describe moot court to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is?
Professor Anderson, are you referring to like the competitions?
Well, yeah, let's talk about the competitions a little bit.
So first you have to take the AAA class, and then if you make moot court, then you go to a competition. And for all of the competitions, you have at least one partner, and you're responsible for writing a brief. And your brief will be graded, and that'll be part of your score, along with your oral advocacy score at the competition, to see if you actually move on. And so something that's very unique about moot court is that you take this AAA class where Professor Anderson teaches you how to write in a very organized manner, and then you take those skills that you learn and then you work with a partner. And so it's very hands-on learning. I personally hated writing, but moot court forced me to practice writing and continue to improve, and now I feel like it's one of my strengths. And so on top of, just like Trenton was saying, on top of the oral advocacy at the competition, you also will be writing a brief. So that's kind of my take on it.
So Tommy, you have concrete evidence that you've become a better writer, don't you?
Yes, my partner, Sarah, who's the Chief Justice, and I got third place appellate brief at our competition. Thankfully, we got to keep it. Our competition was just in time, so it didn't get canceled. But it was the best feeling in the world, because our brief beat out schools like Columbia and, Ivy League schools. And so it's truly a testament to how much, if you take the course and you take it seriously and you implement all of the things you learn, that your writing can become very strong.
Yeah. So we should mention that it's our plan that Logan and I will record a separate video that will go through the specific details about how you try out for moot court and a little bit more information about exactly how it works. But I'll just add right now, before we move on, that it is actually a co-curricular activity in the sense that you get academic credit for it. It's not like joining one of the fraternities or a student organization where you don't get academic credit for it. You actually do. You get 2 academic credit hours in a semester in which you do a competition, and you get 1 credit for when you are doing what we call administrative hours, which is helping run our internal competitions, the intramural competition, and then the national health law competition. And by the time you're done, most people have 5 credit hours total that they get from moot court. Sometimes a few people will end up with 6, but 5 is usually the minimum amount that you earn if you do your 3 semesters of moot court. So it's a class, basically. It substitutes for 1 or 2 of your classes that you would otherwise take throughout the rest of your time. I mentioned the intramural competition, and Tommy, you've also, and a couple of others have mentioned the AAA class. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what the class is and what the intramural class is?
Sure. AAA, Advanced Appellate Advocacy, is a class that you take in the fall as a 2L. And at first, it is very intimidating because you receive the problem in the summer, and then you have a brief that is due within the first couple of weeks of classes starting fall semester of your 2L year. I have to emphasize that this is not a graded brief. This is just for the intramural competition that you go through that is part of the class and part of, or is how you try out to get on the moot court team. And so I know a lot of people are very intimidated thinking, oh my gosh, there's this brief due the second week of class. I don't even know how to write how Professor Anderson wants us to write. Don't panic. It's just part of the process. And I think the gentleman on the call can attest to it. You'll make it through, I promise.
You have a partner to write with.
Yes, you do have a partner. Thank you, Dylan. So then we have the intramural competition in the fall, and it's a Friday and a Saturday, right, Professor Anderson?
Over 2 weekends. It's a Friday and a Saturday, both weekends.
Where you deliver your oral arguments, and that, as I said, this is just a intramural competition, so you're just, competing with your peers, and you'll have outside judges, and you'll have practice rounds, and it's just kind of a process, but it is a way for you to practice your oral advocacy skills. And you're also doing this and working on a problem that Professor Anderson will give you for the AAA class. And Professor Anderson will teach you. She writes a very good, she wrote a very good book on how to organize your writing, how to structure it, how to be concise, how to take wordiness. I was a very wordy writer before, and she'll walk you step by step through how to do large scale organization. And so that is AAA in a nutshell. I don't know if I did it justice, but I tried.
I think you did a good job. Does anybody have anything else that they wanted to add that they thought that for clarity? I think Tommy covered most everything, I think.
Did we cover like what goes on during a round? It's like 15 rebuttal.
We could do that. Now, I think the lawyering skills arguments are going to be different, but I think time length wise, but otherwise what you're describing, I think is an interesting thing. So Dylan, what were you talking about?
Yeah, so I think you'll actually do a shorter one for your 1L oral argument, but for the competition and for moot court competitions, what you do is you have a petitioner and respondent side, and then since you have two people on each team, each side has 30 minutes allotted to them. You split those up usually evenly between the partners, and then petitioner will reserve usually 2 minutes for a rebuttal. So the first two people on petitioner will go argue their issues, and then respondent, both partners will argue their issues, and then petitioner uses their reserve time for a rebuttal. So that's kind of how a round goes, and it lasts about an hour. So.
Yeah, and as we said, I think the lawyering skills is probably shorter than that, but the order is the same as from what I understand. Yeah. And then you have a panel of judges who ask you questions, and then you hope to try to respond to those questions. And then afterwards, they generally give you feedback, and they let you know what they thought you did well and what they think you can improve on. And so in a moot court competition, you do at least 2, some competitions are 3, some are 4 preliminary rounds. And then you hope to get to the elimination rounds, which is just like a regular, like a basketball tournament where you go head to head. And if you win your round, you advance until finally they name a winner of the competition. So you can go as many as, I think 8 arguments by the time you're done over generally a 2 or 3 day period. So I always call it the football of law school. We can also call it the basketball of law school, I suppose, too. But it's just like that kind of competition that you might have been familiar with when you were in undergrad and in high school and so forth.
Yeah, if you're a competitive person, this is definitely something that you'll want to at least check out, because it really, as someone who played sports growing up, like this is something that really gets your competitive juices flowing. And you're going up against a different team and you hear them say something that's wrong or something you want to contend against, and your heart starts beating fast. You want to get right back up to the podium and tell everyone why they're wrong and why you're right. And it can, it gets exciting. But yeah, sports for law nerds is definitely an apt assertion. So.
Yes, he's referring to a meme that I sent out, which I will share with everybody so he can see what he's talking about. But also saying, you know, that if you're not somebody who's like sports competitive, but you just like the challenge of getting on your feet and having that conversation and just sort of like exercising your brain. Even if you're kind of an introvert, I know I will personally describe myself as more introverted than your usual law professor type, perhaps. I really liked doing moot court because I really got a chance just to sort of, you know, see what I knew and see what I could explain. And I just liked the challenge of that. So, you know, it's a fun opportunity that way. So I tell you what, this video is kind of getting on a little bit long. Let's end this way. I had asked the group to think about 3 reasons for taking AAA/moot court. How about if we just boil it down to each person share one quick reason? You know, if you sort of just had to, if you had 15 seconds to convince somebody that they should take AAA or moot court, what would you tell them? And I think, Dylan, why don't you go ahead and start with that?
Okay, I'll start with my main one for doing it is because I was uncomfortable with public speaking. And the only way I know to make myself get used to something or to make myself better at something is to just kind of jump into it. So, I mean, I would advise anyone who might be reluctant about it just because they're not super excited about public speaking. I would say this is completely different. And second, like, you get so much better at it just by throwing yourself into the fire and just kind of picking up skills that way. And that's what I did. And I've grown so much in just 6 months of doing moot court stuff so far. So,
how about Trent?
I would say to boost your resume, I think that's a good motivator. Moot court looks very good on a job resume. And at the same time, you're helping yourself. You're having some fun in law school, getting into some competitions.
Logan?
I think to continually get better is by far the main reason I chose to do it, because after your first year, you don't really write a whole brief again for a class unless you take a writing class. So in this way, you're continually writing one each semester and you're keeping your skills up where they need to be for practice in the real world.
Okay, and Tommy, why don't you end? We'll end our video with Tommy's comments. Well, not to put her on the spot or anything.
I'm just following off of everything they said, especially Logan. I've been told by countless attorneys that your writing speaks volumes, and practically, if you're working just as a regular attorney before a judge, the judge will always see your motions or what have you before they ever get a chance to hear what you have to say. And if you cannot convey precisely and concisely what you want them to know and why you should win or they should rule in your favor, then that's half the battle right there. So it's very important.
All right. Okay.
Professor, if I could just add one more, there's no final in AAA. So you can kind of lighten your ending schedule there a little bit.
That's right. What he means is that the graded brief, which is a project that you do by yourself, by the way, you do the intramural with a partner, but the graded brief in the class is just by yourself. And that's due, depending on where the calendar falls, right around Thanksgiving break. But then you don't have anything to worry about you got your credit hours done for the class, and you get to focus on the rest of your classes for the rest of the semester. All right, guys, good conversation. We're going to take a break on this video, and then we got a few more things to talk about, and we'll pick that up in a separate video.